And the first question we have on the agenda is, which offensive player will exceed expectations this season?
People who listen to our podcast won't be surprised by this, but I'm going with Roman Wilson. I've been a Roman Wilson guy all offseason, and really for a while now, but I just think there's more there than what we've seen. And he's been productive, he's been good, especially when healthy. We got to remember too, right in the middle of the last 2 seasons, he's had a hand injury and then he had a concussion that he suffered at Iowa last year. And he had strong starts before that. I feel like that kind of messed up his seasons, and then he heats up at the end. He was huge with 2 touchdowns in that Penn State game 2 years ago on the road, massive in the TCU game, in the Fiesta Bowl, even though it didn't go Michigan's way. So I'm going with Roman Wilson. The speed he has, I like his route running. I think you're going to see him more on the outside as opposed to the slot this season, and he'll take a bigger role. I think he's going to lead this team in receiving. So I am just going to stick with Roman Wilson, and I will, I'll die on that hill, but I do think that I'll end up being right with that.
Well, people that listen to this podcast know that I have repeatedly referred to Roman Wilson as a 1,000-yard receiver. So
I love
you just made me so happy, Clayton. That is a guy I have been like ride or die for on this podcast. Matt, who do you see exceeding expectations on the offense this season?
Well, to you guys' credit, and to Roman Wilson's credit, I think that he's going to have an absolute great season. But I got the opposite side of that equation. I've got Cornelius Johnson having an above average season per expectation this year. I think a lot of people are counting this guy out. I don't know if necessarily anyone's counting either of them out, but I just don't know if anyone sees like star potential in either of them. So I'm going to say that Cornelius Johnson, he's been a guy that's been around, one of the few guys left on the roster that knows what it's like to lose to Ohio State. It's been so long, you know what I mean? So I think that Cornelius Johnson is going to have a great season, at least a 900-yard receiving season. So I'm going to go with Cornelius Johnson for that one.
Man, I was so close to picking Peyton O'Leary as my guy. And so we almost had 3 wide receivers in this category here. Clayton, you feel good about the Cornelius Johnson call out by Matt there?
Well, is he calling us out for, saying Roman Wilson's going to lead the team? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
No,
I think he.
No, I mean, okay, I think Cornelius Johnson is going to have a good season. We have to remember too, people that are concerned about the wide receiving core, and I'm not necessarily concerned, but I do recognize that there's probably not a game breaker here. These 2 guys, Cornelius and Roman Wilson, led Michigan at their wide receiver spot 2 years ago when they won a Big Ten title with a worse quarterback, no offense to Cade, than they're going to have this season in JJ's second year. So they should be more than enough as long as they stay healthy, as long as they get enough from Tyler Morris. You got good tight ends, I'm sure we'll talk about, great running backs, great offensive line, and again, JJ will be better. I just think in terms of upside, Roman Wilson has a little bit more or quite a bit more. And Cornelius Johnson, I don't want to say he is what he is because he can improve, but I feel like he's just been so steady and so solid for a while that he'll just continue to be that. I don't necessarily see a big leap out of him, but I'm not knocking the pick. He may have 900 yards. He may lead the team. He's led the team in receiving before, so I think he's going to be productive this season.
That's fair. And to your point, no, I'm not knocking Roman. I think that there's a world where not even just these 2 guys, but honestly, multiple guys kind of eat in what Michigan has going on next year. So I'm sure we'll get to more of that as the pod goes on. But I think that both of them have a little bit of meat on the bone going into this season. So we'll see how that kind of all culminates.
Well, it sounds like we're all feeling like JJ McCarthy is going to air it out a little bit more, because my pick for this question of which offensive player will exceed expectations, I'm going to go with AJ Barner. And that's a little bit of a strategic pick for me, because to me, I feel like one of the positions you want to be in on a Jim Harbaugh offense is that second string tight end, right? I feel like Harbaugh loves getting multiple tight ends on the field. We saw Schoonmaker make a living when Eric All was kind of a decoy tight end for a while there. And so I think, we could see Matthew Hibner really take a step up, but I think AJ Barner is going to be that guy. I think we could see, a couple hundred receiving yards from him, which is more than I think people would expect. And so I'm going to go ahead and say AJ Barner. How do you guys feel about that?
I like it. I like that pick. Michigan had, multiple tight ends on the field more than 50% of the time last year. So that's a great pick. And I'm going to save the rest of my assessment there for the next question because it kind of ties in a little bit.
Oh no, I feel some Colston Loveland hate coming, man. Let's
no,
go
not
ahead.
hate. Not hate.
I know. Let's go ahead and go to which offensive player do you think will struggle to meet expectations this season? And we might as well go to you first on this one, Clayton, since we already alluded to some stuff here. Let me just say, I almost picked Colston Loveland for this category. So if that is in fact your pick, no shade will be thrown from this direction. So Clayton, who will struggle to meet expectations?
So I think Colston Loveland is going to have a great season. I just think the expectations are a little bit too high. This happens sometimes where it's kind of funny. Like there are some guys on a roster that everyone assumes will be way better than they were the year before. And then there are some guys that people forget that they can improve and they think they'll be the same as they were the year before. It's hard to pinpoint which guys those are going to be. That's kind of what we're doing right now. And it's a tough exercise. I'm saying Roman's going to take a big leap. Cornelius might not. I could be wrong about that. I just think the expectations are a little bit too high for Colston Loveland. Although I think he's going to have a great season. I think he's going to have a fantastic career here, and he's off to a great start. I just don't think maybe he'll be an All-American type guy or first-team All-Big Ten type guy quite yet. And AJ Barner's there too. They're going to spread that out a little bit. They're both going to be on the field. They're both going to get their touches. So I'm going to say Colston Loveland. He's not going to struggle, but he may struggle to meet those very, very lofty expectations that I keep seeing online.
I love the pick. I completely understand where you're coming from. I know Matt is very high on Colston Loveland, so I'm going to let him comment on this.
I do. And God, this does kind of suck, right? I mean, we're essentially surrendering a little bit of our faith in one of these guys to have a superstar campaign this year. So I've got one take that's a lot safer and then one that's maybe a little bit more spicy. I'm going to say Darius Clemens, and really not even just Darius Clemens, but probably anybody in that wide receiver 3 and under spot. I mean, we saw it this past season, the departure of Andrell Anthony, AJ Henning, a lot of notable guys that were expected to excel in that mantle. And I think the same guys that are stepping into that role this season are on watch for the same thing. We've got really talented wideouts in Tyler Morris, Darius Clemens that are going to be juniors this year. I think that Colston Loveland, I think that Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, AJ Barner, those 4 guys are going to absolutely eat this year. I think they're going to eat up a lot of the offensive play yardage. And I just don't know if anybody under those 4 names is going to get any kind of substantial run this year. So I think that it's going to be another year of an Andrell Anthony situation for guys like Darius Clemens. So we'll kind of see how that goes. Another name that I kind of thought of is Blake Corum. And I know that a lot of people might disagree with that. He's our Heisman returning guy. But I just don't know, man. He had such a great season last year. You got to think, this guy rushed for over 100 yards in every single game that he played in, almost 200 yards in a lot of them. He's coming off a very painful injury, one that he's still not fully recovered from. So I think that there's a world for Blake Corum to absolutely take off this year. but I don't know if we're going to be expecting the same type of run from him this year that we saw last year. And a lot of people might be kind of like waving their hands around, wondering what's up with that. But that's just the reality of this year's team and the situation it's going into.
That's a really good point on Blake Corum. I mean, the expectations are through the roof, right? So if this guy falls flat a couple games, or the more likely scenario is, the ball's going to get spread around, right? There's probably going to be some load management. Donovan's probably going to get more carries than he got last year. And so in order for Blake Corum to meet expectations, he's going to need 20 touchdowns and 1,700 rushing yards. So yeah, that's actually a really good point, Matt.
It's one that hurts to say, but the more that I think about it, the more that I hear that he's not fully recovered, which it hurts to say, but you really don't love to hear that when it's a month until the season. You know what I mean? But I think that he's an absolutely explosive athlete. I think that there might be a couple games into the season where we still see him not contribute or maybe even sit out. So I just want people to kind of temper their expectations of what kind of Blake Corum they're getting this year, and it might look a little bit different.
Yeah, so the guy I picked for who's going to struggle to meet or exceed expectations this year, I'm actually in the running back room as well. I went a little deeper on the depth chart because I was thinking about who has some buzz coming out of that spring game. We were all talking about Benjamin Hall, right? He was the hot name. And I feel like some of the expectations have come back down to reality on Benjamin Hall. But I still think that between him and Cole Cabana, one of them is probably going to get redshirted. And I think because Cabana might be involved in special teams that we see Benjamin Hall get redshirted. So a lot of people are thinking that he's going to make an immediate impact. I think he's going to be great. I think the spring game was not a fluke. He's going to be a great running back. He's a Mike Hart kind of prototypical running back. I just don't think there's enough carries to go around this season. I see Benjamin Hall really struggling to meet his expectations.
I like that. You got some strategic picks there. That's good. He had some buzz, probably too much. I agree. I'd probably bet on him potentially redshirting.
All right, let's move to the defensive side of the ball, which in some ways is an even more fun side of the ball to talk about because there's a lot of wide open spaces. We've got some interesting transfers on the defensive side of the ball. So along with transfers comes more question marks. And so Matt, I'm going to start with you. We're going to reverse rotation on this one, on this side of the ball here. Which defensive player will exceed expectations this season?
Well, I think that everybody's automatically always drawn to the names that we've set forth during the off season for the depth chart, but I'm going off grid a little bit here. I'm going with Caden Colasar. I think that he's going to pop a little bit in the secondary. He's been referenced a couple times on In the Trenches for his contributions. So I think that's a name that nobody's talking about, that they're going to find a way to get a place on the field for. Another name that I have, me with all my honorable mentions, I'm going to slide in there, is Rayshon Benny. I think that I'm kind of setting my mind on that this is a guy that's going to be very explosive on the interior defensive line. He's transformed his whole body, the way that he plays. I think that he's going to be in for a surprise. He's going to surprise some people going into this season. So those are my guys that I don't think anybody's really putting too much attention into that are going to absolutely shine this year.
Clayton, do you agree with Matt there, or did you take it in a different direction?
Well, no, I love the Rayshon Benny pick. I think that's a good one that maybe I was pretty torn on making. I'm going to go with Derek Moore, though. And it's not that expectations are low on him. I just feel like they're a little bit mild. Everyone knows that he has some upside to him. I mean, he was a top 50 recruit. He showed some flashes last season, but He lost a little bit of weight. He said he feels a little bit more explosive. And I think that just in another year in this system, he's going to break out. I do have him. We had to pick this in our the Wolverine magazine, football preview magazine, and I picked him as my breakout player on defense. Braden McGregor, I think, is going to be very good as well. They play that same side at the edge spot, but I just think Derek Moore is going to have some juice to him this year, so I'm going with him. But I love the Rayshon Benny pick. He's another guy that I think could end up being a starter or something like that by the end of the year, or at least is going to be heavily rotated in there on that defensive line.
Well, there's an enormous amount of parity and competition on that defensive line this season. It's like none of us really know, like, who is that guy going to be? And my pick is also on the defensive line, but it's not a name that you guys have said yet. So I actually think the guy that's going to exceed expectations is Jalen Harrell. And, Clayton, you brought up some of these guys we just expect to be who they are, and then other guys we sort of like have knighted them as the next big thing, and at Michigan.
Yep.
For me, it feels like Jalen Harrell has been typecasted. Like, oh, he's going to be really good. We know who he is, but everybody loves to say like, Braden is the next Aiden, and Josiah is coming in and he's going to lead the team in sacks. And for me, I feel like Jalen Harrell is just, got his nose down. He's grinding. He's working hard. He's really set up to perhaps lead the team in sacks this year and be really a stud on that defensive line. So I'm going to go with him, but I also am open to the idea that everybody on that line has like 4 or 5 sacks, and that nobody goes like Aiden Hutchinson or David Ojabo with it. So, we shall see. But let's look at the less inspirational question on the defensive side of the ball here. Who do you guys think might struggle to meet expectations? Matt, we'll start with you.
I'm so glad that you started with me, because I'm going to keep it right along the same defensive line that we're talking about. With probably the more obvious pick, I'm going to go with Braden McGregor. And really, I didn't even realize the expectations are still high for him until this poll that I put out on Twitter the other day, basically asking everyone who they thought would lead the team in sacks this year. To my surprise, everyone is once again saying Braden McGregor will lead the team in sacks this year, which, again, no shade to Braden McGregor. I love Braden McGregor. I love everyone on Michigan football. But, it just hasn't culminated yet. So for that to be the expectation, I don't know. I just question it a little bit. I got to see it. You know what I mean? So I think that he's still in for a step up this year. But I don't know if I foresee him being the guy that leads this team in sacks. So if that's what the majority of people are expecting, I'm going to have to say that I would have to pump the brakes on that one a little bit.
I don't hate that. I don't hate that pick. I do think that he's going to have a step up this year. And I think the question just becomes, like, where do you gauge those expectations, right? Like, are the expectations through the roof or not? It appears as though you interpreted it as they are. I think that's fair. A lot of people, they still unfairly say this guy's going to be the next Aiden Hutchinson, which is like, come on, you compare a guy to Aiden Hutchinson, like that's just setting himself up to fall short. So
exactly,
Clayton,
I wouldn't have even named him as the person, but like I didn't know that everybody's expecting him to lead the team in sacks again. So I don't know. I'm just going to have to just approach that one with a little bit more caution and see how it all turns out. But I don't know. He might struggle to meet those expectations if that's truly what everyone thinks.
Agreed.
Matt, that's a great point, because this is like, these aren't even knocking the guys we're picking here. It's more about like what other people are saying. And as you said, Mike, we're interpreting things differently. I may have seen a tweet or a comment that you guys didn't about a guy that people think he's going to win the Heisman or something like that. So it's very interesting, just how we're picking these. And I will use that as a preface to say that my pick, and I don't hate that pick, by the way, but my pick is Mason Graham. And I think Mason Graham's going to be very good. I also think that there's just kind of been this notion, whether it's fans or media, where it's like you lose Mozzie Smith, first guy at the defensive tackle spot from Michigan to be picked in the first round since 1985, who was very, very good, probably an underrated player. The way he took on double teams and still had actually, a decent amount of production. Look at his stats over the last 2 seasons. So I think people maybe took him for granted just a little bit, and they're just saying, oh, well, we have Mason Graham and, Kenneth Grant to come in at that nose spot. It's kind of easy to just say that and then move on to the next topic, but they got to be really good. They have to be really good. So I guess I'm kind of grouping Kenneth Grant in there as well. But if you want to live up to what Mozzie Smith did last season, they're going to have to do a really good job. Mason Graham is much smaller than Mozzie Smith. I think everybody's much smaller than Mozzie Smith, but you got to take on a lot of double teams. What Michigan wants to do in this defense is not have to load the box, but still stop the run at a high level and get the offense kind of off schedule a little bit. And a lot of that comes down to the nose tackle. There's a ton on that position's plate. So for me, it's going to be Mason Graham, and a lot of that has to do with people maybe glossing over how big, how much is going to be on his plate this season and how big of shoes he has to fill.
I hate that, but I love it as well.
He's still going to be good because he's still going to be
good. Yeah. I love it because I think all your points were fantastic. Those are big shoes to fill, literally and figuratively, when we're talking about Mozzie Smith. I hate it because I'm drinking the Mason Graham Kool-Aid. I wake up in the morning drinking Mason Graham Kool-Aid. So I'm excited just to see what he does in his sophomore season. But it is hard to make that big of a step up when you become the guy and you're marching out on the field as a first stringer. The expectations change and the challenge changes. I'm going to be the first guy in this whole defensive side of the ball. I'm going to venture into the secondary. I noticed we didn't talk about any linebackers, so I guess we all kind of think we know who they are. And I'm going to venture into the secondary. The guy that I think is going to struggle to live up to expectations. And by the way, I hate my answer. I absolutely hate my answer. I hope I'm wrong.
Just by
Josh
saying
Wallace.
The secondary, you're already wrong.
Yeah. I think Josh Wallace may struggle to live up to expectations. And here's why. Everybody just got excited and assumes like, awesome, check. We've got that guy across from Will Johnson. Amarion Walker has less pressure on him now. He can learn the defensive side of the ball. We feel really good with Rod and Makari, in the safety spots. Will Johnson's a stud. We know that. Mike Sanders still in the, playing a little closer to the line of scrimmage. The secondary is looking good. Well, Josh Wallace was playing at UMass last year. I know he's a stud. I know he has the measurables. I know he's a very good football player. But we can't forget that the level of competition that he's going to be facing day in and day out, it just got a whole lot tougher. So if there's any guy in that secondary that may struggle or may require a little bit of, I hate to say a learning curve with a guy that's an upperclassman, but a little bit of a readjustment, I think Josh Wallace might be that guy.
You just never know how that transition up is going to go. Let me take it to the basketball terms. Mike Smith, then Devontae Jones, a little bit different. He needed some more time. Other guys that are making that, what you call them an up transfer. You just don't know. Josiah Stewart, is he going to step in and be incredible right away as a pass rusher, or is it going to maybe take him some time? How do you translate, 12 and a half sacks in a season in the Sun Belt? How do you compare that to the Big Ten? It's going to come down to also developing at Michigan and taking his time. So I like that pick. There are a lot of different scenarios that could play out for Josh Wallace this season. He could end up being, like a Wayne Lyons from back in 2015, where it was a big pickup at the time at corner, Jim Harbaugh's first season, and he played special teams. So you just don't know what's going to be the path for some of these guys.
That pick is fair. However, I don't think that I just The only thing that I would mention is that I don't know how high the level of expectation is just for Josh Wallace, just because I think that a lot of people are presuming that someone else might step into that role, maybe by later in the season. Jair Hill, potentially somebody else, Amarion Walker, once they kind of get their footing under them. So I think that most people just hope that Josh Wallace is going to be like a Band-Aid, if anything, until some of those guys can get some meaningful reps in. But obviously the hope is that he can blossom into something just as elite opposite of Will Johnson. So I don't know. Hopefully we see that, but hopefully we've got some other guys just kind of waiting to also take that guy's spot, because at the end of the day, he's gone too after this season.